When my son stepped outside and saw the empty backyard, he looked up at me with his wide, hopeful eyes and asked, "Did nobody want to come, Mom?" I forced a smile so he wouldn't see the ache in my chest. I told him maybe they were just running late. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe anything but the truth. He turned back toward the space-themed decorations we'd put up together the night before. The balloons we tied to the fence swayed gently in the breeze, untouched. The cake sat perfectly centered on the folding table, with his name written across the top in blue frosting. Eli, age 8. Every chair was empty. Then I heard the voice behind me. My neighbor, Mrs. Radley, leaned over the fence and said loud enough for Eli to hear, "No one wants to celebrate with a broken family." I didn't respond, not because I didn't have words, but because if I opened my mouth, I might fall apart. Eli stood still, his small hands clenched at his sides. I could tell he was trying not to cry. I wanted to fix everything in that moment, to give him joy, to make him feel seen, but I felt powerless. Then, out of nowhere, a black van rolled up to the curb. Slowly, quietly. The engine cut off. Doors opened. 3 men stepped out, dressed in full Air Force uniforms, one of them carrying a cake. The entire street fell silent. My name is Lena Monroe, and for the last year, it's just been me and my son, Eli. I didn't expect to be raising him alone. I didn't plan on becoming a single mother before I turned 35, but life rarely asks for permission before it breaks you. Eli's father left last spring. There was no big fight, no dramatic ending. He just stopped trying. One day, he came home from work, said he needed space, and packed a duffel bag. He moved into an apartment across town and gradually faded out of our lives. At first, I held it together for Eli. I kept his bedtime routine the same, made sure his lunches were packed, showed up to parent-teacher conferences with a brave face. But deep down, I was unraveling. Eli never asked why his dad wasn't around anymore. He just got quieter, started sleeping with the light on, stopped asking to invite friends over. I tried to overcompensate. I'd buy him extra sprinkles for his pancakes. I'd sit through the same dinosaur documentary 20 times just to hear him laugh. On Saturdays, we'd build forts in the living room and pretend we were explorers on alien planets. Eli has always been imaginative. He believes in kindness, in good guys and heroes. He's the kind of kid who says thank you to the mailman and hugs stray dogs. So when he told me 3 months ago that he wanted a real birthday party this year, with games and decorations and cake and friends, I told him absolutely yes. No hesitation. I picked up extra shifts at the diner. I stopped buying coffee and did my nails at home. Every extra dollar went into a little white envelope I kept hidden in the kitchen drawer, labeled Eli's Big Day. He picked the theme himself, Space Explorer Training Camp. We made cardboard rockets together. He wanted to dress up like an astronaut, and I found him the perfect helmet at a thrift store downtown. We hand-wrote the invitations. I helped him pass them out at school. He was so proud. He told me every morning how many days were left. 8 more days, Mom. 4 more days, Mom. Tomorrow's the launch. He asked me if I thought his friends would like the moonwalk I rented. I said of course they would, but in the back of my mind there was a quiet fear, a fear I didn't want to say out loud. Ever since the divorce, things had changed. The parents I used to chat with at school pickup barely looked at me anymore. Some pulled their kids from playdates without explanation. Others just said things like, "We're really busy lately." I tried not to take it personally. I told myself people were just dealing with their own lives, but I knew what was really going on. In a town like ours, a single mom might as well be carrying a scarlet letter, especially one whose ex-husband used to coach Little League and lead prayer circles. People chose sides even when I didn't ask them to. Still, I didn't want Eli to feel that. I didn't want him to carry the weight of my broken marriage. The night before his party, we stayed up late blowing up balloons and taping silver stars to the fence. He told me it was going to be the best day of his life. I told him I couldn't wait to see it. I remember the way he looked at everything when we were done. He stood in the middle of the yard, arms crossed like a captain surveying his ship. "You think people will like it?" he asked. "They're going to love it," I said. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I kept replaying the invitations in my head, the smiles I thought I saw from the other kids. I wanted to believe the best. The morning of the party, I made Eli's favorite breakfast, banana pancakes with chocolate chips. He wore his astronaut costume all day, kept asking what time it was. How many more minutes until people showed up? At 2 o'clock sharp, we opened the gate. Music started playing. The cake was ready. His party table had goodie bags, plastic telescopes, and glow-in-the-dark stickers. And we waited. Every passing minute felt like a paper cut, small but sharp, a reminder. He kept looking at the street. Every time a car passed, he ran to the gate, then came back slower than he left. An hour later, he asked if maybe they just got lost. I told him maybe. But deep down, I knew. And when that woman next door said what she did, when she reminded me exactly how people saw us now, I felt something in me start to crack. Eli was still staring at the empty chairs when I whispered, "We'll make this day special anyway." I meant it, but I didn't know how. Not yet. By 3 o'clock, I knew. No one was coming. I kept checking my phone, even though there were no notifications, no texts saying, "running late," or "we're on our way." Just silence. Eli sat at the party table with his little astronaut gloves still on, trying to open a juice box. I watched him struggle for a second before I stepped in to help. He smiled at me and said, "Maybe they're parking far away and walking." I nodded and said, "Yeah, that could be it." But my heart was breaking. The music I'd spent an hour picking out started to feel loud and awkward, so I turned it down. The balloons we tied up that morning had started to droop in the sun. One of them popped, and Eli jumped. He laughed nervously and looked around to see if anyone else thought it was funny. No one did. He looked at me and whispered, "I think we should wait inside. They'll probably come when it's cooler." I helped him gather the unopened goodie bags. I saw how he avoided looking at the empty chairs. I wanted to take all the pain away, but I didn't know how. Not this kind of pain. We stepped into the kitchen, and I told him to start on his scavenger hunt while I finished getting the cake ready. Really, I just needed a minute to cry. I turned away from him, opened the fridge, and bit down on the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. I couldn't let him see me like that. Just then, he asked from the living room, "Mom, are broken families bad?" I froze. My hands were still gripping the edge of the counter. I turned around slowly and said, "What do you mean, honey?" He looked at me with eyes too serious for an 8-year-old. "Mrs. Radley said nobody wants to come to our house because we're a broken family." There it was, the sentence that shattered me. I dropped to my knees in front of him and took off his helmet. "No," I said firmly. "We are not broken. We are strong. Just because it's you and me doesn't mean we're less than anyone else." He nodded like he believed me, but his eyes were still full of questions. That woman had always made little comments, subtle digs about Eli playing alone or about how I was doing my best like it was a charity case, but this was the first time she'd let her bitterness spill over in front of my son. I walked to the window and peeked through the curtain. She was in her garden, pruning her roses like she hadn't just kicked my son's heart in the teeth. I opened the back door and stood on the porch. She didn't even turn to look. "Nice turnout," she said without glancing up. "Guess people aren't interested in awkward situations." I wanted to scream at her, to march into her yard and tell her exactly what I thought of her cruel little remarks. But I didn't, because Eli was standing behind me, watching, and I didn't want him to see me become someone ugly. I took a breath and said, "You didn't have to say that in front of my son." She finally looked at me. "Kids should know the truth early. Life isn't some fantasy." I shut the door quietly and turned back to Eli. His helmet was back on. He'd started the scavenger hunt on his own. He was crouched behind the couch with a toy telescope, pretending to scan for alien life. I watched him for a second. He was trying so hard to be okay. I couldn't let this be how he remembered his 8th birthday. I wouldn't. I grabbed the Bluetooth speaker and cranked up the music again. I walked outside and shouted into the yard, "Commander Eli, mission control is online. Prepare for launch." He poked his head around the corner. "Really?" "Absolutely. We've got a mission to complete. Alien life forms have taken over Sector 4. His face lit up. He ran outside and pointed dramatically at the tree near the fence. "They're hiding behind that asteroid." And just like that, we were back in the game. We ran, we dodged invisible laser beams, we laughed louder than I'd heard him laugh in weeks. He was sweating under his costume, but he didn't care. I didn't either. At one point, I caught my breath and looked around. No guests, no RSVP texts, just me and my son. But there was joy in his voice again. That was something. Then, just as we were planning our final assault on the alien mothership, aka the shed, we heard it. Tires. Gravel crunching. I turned toward the street. A black van was pulling up to the curb. At first, I thought it was a delivery van. Maybe someone sent Eli a surprise gift. Maybe my mom had ordered something last minute. Maybe anything that would give this day some kind of magic. But this van was different. Matte black. No logos. The kind of vehicle you'd expect in a movie, not on our quiet little street lined with minivans and wind chimes. It came to a slow stop right in front of our house. The engine went silent. I instinctively stepped in front of Eli. The side door slid open. 3 men stepped out one by one. They were dressed in full Air Force uniforms, clean, pressed, boots polished. One of them, tall, maybe early 40s, was carrying a cake box in his gloved hands. Another held a large wrapped present. The third wore a pair of aviators and looked like he'd walked straight out of a recruitment poster. I didn't understand what I was seeing. I glanced at Eli. He was frozen in place, his little hand still clutching the plastic telescope. The man with the cake approached first. He stopped just inside the yard and looked at me kindly. "Ma'am," he said, "we're looking for a Commander Eli Monroe." Eli blinked. "That's me." The man's face broke into a smile. "Sir, we were informed today was your launch celebration. We've come to report for duty and bring supplies from the base." I stared at him, stunned. I don't understand. How did you—" He held up his phone and turned the screen to show me. It was my social media post from earlier, the photo of Eli sitting alone in his birthday chair under the space banner we made together. The caption read, "I just wanted one happy day for my boy." I'd written it in a moment of desperation, hoping someone out there might hear me. I never imagined anyone actually would. "We were off duty, just wrapping up a community training," the man continued. "Saw the post. We figured we could do something about it." I didn't know whether to cry or hug them. Eli looked up at me with eyes wide in disbelief. "Are they real?" he whispered. I nodded slowly. "They're real, baby." The airmen went back to the van and started unloading. Not just one present, but multiple. A telescope, a model rocket kit, a signed photo from a real astronaut. One of them pulled out a folding table, another set up chairs, and the man with the cake gently placed it on the center of our original party table, right where ours had started to melt in the sun. The cake was navy blue with tiny edible stars and planets. In the center, in white icing, it read, "Commander Eli, mission accomplished." Eli stood perfectly still, like he couldn't believe it was real. Then one of the airmen knelt down and held out a badge. "This is for you, Commander. Space Exploration Honorary Unit. Welcome aboard." Eli took it with both hands and stared at it like it was made of gold. Then, with all the pride in the world, he saluted. The men straightened and saluted back. It was quiet, respectful, powerful. I heard a door creak open across the street. Mrs. Radley had stepped out onto her porch, pruning shears still in hand. She squinted at the uniforms, then backed into her house without a word. A few other neighbors peeked through blinds. No one said anything. The whole street felt like it had been hit with a wave of silence and awe. Then Eli turned to me and asked, "Can I invite them to play the scavenger hunt?" I laughed, actually laughed for the first time all day. I think they'd be honored. The rest of the afternoon, we had a real party. Not the one I planned, but something even better. They helped Eli search for alien artifacts in the yard. One of them let him try on a real Air Force cap. Another taught him how to stand at attention. He soaked up every second of it. And I stood there watching, trying to memorize the way his face looked. Joyful, validated, seen. Not left behind, not forgotten. This wasn't a rescue mission, it was a reminder that sometimes, when the people closest to you disappoint you the most, the kindness of strangers can feel like a miracle. I didn't know who had shared my post or how far it traveled. Somehow, it found the right hearts. And those hearts showed up, in a black van, with a cake, and a sense of honor that filled the emptiest day with something unforgettable. The sun had dipped lower in the sky by the time the cake was cut. Eli stood at the head of the table, still wearing his space helmet, surrounded by men in uniform who clapped and cheered as I lit the candles. I watched his face glow with the flickering light, his eyes wide, cheeks flushed from running and laughing. I held the lighter a second longer than I needed to, trying to burn the image into my memory. "All right, Commander," said the man who had brought the cake. "Make a wish and prepare for launch." Eli closed his eyes tightly. I saw his little fists clench at his sides like the wish had to pass through every part of his body before he blew. Then, one big puff. Cheers erupted. They all clapped again, someone whistled, and one of the airmen gave Eli a high five so hard he nearly toppled over. As I sliced the cake, one of the men leaned in and said quietly, "He's a good kid. You're doing something right." That nearly undid me. I nodded, smiling too hard, blinking too fast, trying not to fall apart right there with a plastic knife in my hand. We passed slices of cake around. I grabbed a juice box from the cooler, handed it to Eli, and sat beside him on the grass. He leaned against me and whispered, "Mom, are they superheroes?" I smiled. "They're real-life ones." He paused. "I don't think I want to be a space explorer anymore." I looked down at him, caught off guard. "No?" He shook his head and pointed at one of the airmen showing off how to fold a paper plane into a fighter jet. "I want to do what they do. I want to help people who feel sad like me." I couldn't speak, because in that moment I realized something had changed in him. Eli wasn't just happy that people showed up. He felt powerful. He felt worthy. He felt seen in a way he hadn't in months. That quiet, invisible ache he'd been carrying since his father left. It didn't disappear, but something inside it shifted. Something lifted. That mattered more than any present or party I could have planned. Later, after cake and games, the airmen gathered in front of the shed, Eli's alien mothership, and asked if they could hold a special ceremony. I said of course. They had him stand tall in front of the shed, helmet tucked under his arm like a real cadet. Then the man with the badge read from a small card. "Commander Eli Monroe," he said loud and proud, "for bravery in the face of isolation, for maintaining high morale during mission failure, and for demonstrating resilience far beyond your rank, we hereby induct you into the United States Space and Air Honorary Youth Corps." He clipped a second badge to Eli's chest and saluted. Eli stood straighter than I'd ever seen him stand. His bottom lip trembled, but he held it together. "I accept the mission," he said. Everyone clapped. It wasn't just sweet, it was sacred. That moment, more than any, was the one I'll carry forever. After they packed up, the airmen shook my hand one by one. Each of them said something kind. "You're a hell of a mom." "You've got one special kid." "You made today unforgettable." I didn't try to pretend I wasn't crying by then. I just thanked them again and again. Because how else do you respond to something like that? The last man to leave turned back before he got in the van. "Hey," he called to Eli. "Next time you plan a mission, let us know. We'll bring the whole crew." Eli saluted. "Yes, sir." And just like that, they were gone. No one else on the block said a word. The Radleys didn't come back out. The other neighbors watched from behind curtains and blinds. But they saw it. They couldn't pretend they hadn't. Eli and I stood in the middle of the yard, now littered with cake crumbs, crumpled napkins, and stomped balloons. It looked like a war zone and felt like a dream. Eli looked up at me and said, "Mom?" "Yeah, baby. Do you think they really liked me?" I bent down, touched his badge, and said, "They didn't just like you, Eli. They respected you." And for the first time in a long time, I saw him believe it. That night, after the last crumbs of cake had been swept up and the final balloon had given in to gravity, I stood at the kitchen sink watching Eli through the window. He was outside in his pajamas, crouched under the stars with his new telescope. He hadn't taken off his honorary badge all evening. It clung slightly crooked to his shirt, glinting in the moonlight like a medal he'd earned in battle. I let the dishwater run too long. I wasn't really washing. I was replaying every moment of the day, every heartbreak, every surprise, every smile that felt like a miracle. This wasn't the party I planned. It wasn't the birthday I imagined for him. But in a way, it turned out to be exactly what he needed, and maybe what I needed too. A little after 9, I called him in. He ran inside with his cheeks flushed, his eyes glowing, and the telescope cradled like a baby. "Can I keep it by my bed tonight?" he asked. "Of course," I said. We went through his nighttime routine, brushed teeth, washed face, changed into clean pajamas. But when I pulled the covers back and tucked him in, I noticed something different. He didn't ask to keep the light on. He didn't say he was scared of being alone in the dark. He just reached for my hand and said, "Thank you for today." I sat on the edge of his bed and brushed his hair back. "You were so brave," I said. "I'm proud of you." "I think Dad would have been proud too," he said, not sadly. Just honestly, like it was a fact he had quietly come to accept. I didn't respond right away. I didn't want to ruin the moment by dragging my pain into his peace, so I just nodded. Yeah, I think he would have been. Eli closed his eyes and held the telescope badge to his chest like it was something sacred. A few minutes later, he was asleep. I sat there longer than I needed to, just watching him breathe. There's something about seeing your child find their light again after you've watched them dim for so long. It's not just relief, it's a kind of rebirth. When I finally left his room, I checked my phone. Dozens of notifications. My post had been shared hundreds of times. Comments from strangers across the country. Offers to send gifts, cards, even one woman who said she wanted to fly out to throw Eli a real party next year. I read each message, every kind word, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not alone. One comment stood out. A woman wrote, "I've been scared to leave my marriage because I didn't want my kids to grow up in a broken family, but after watching what you did for your son, I think I finally understand that being whole doesn't always mean being two parents under one roof." I sat down at the kitchen table and cried, not because I was sad, but because I finally believed something I'd been trying to tell myself for months. We weren't broken. We were healing. And healing doesn't always look like soft music and inspirational quotes. Sometimes it looks like a half-eaten cake, a backyard full of empty chairs, and a black van that pulls up when you least expect it. Sometimes it's a stranger who shows up because they saw your pain and decided to do something about it. The next morning, something strange happened. As I was taking the trash out, Mrs. Radley stepped outside. For the first time, she didn't look smug or judgmental. She looked unsure. She cleared her throat. "Quite a turnout yesterday," she said. I didn't respond. She looked down, fidgeting with the sleeve of her cardigan. I didn't know people still did things like that, showing up for strangers." I just looked at her. Well, sometimes strangers are better than neighbors. She didn't say anything, just nodded once and turned back inside. I didn't need her apology. I wasn't doing this for people like her anymore. This was for Eli, for the kind of boy who believed in stars even when the sky was cloudy, and for the mom who finally remembered how to believe with him. Thank you for listening to our story. If it moved you, if it reminded you that kindness still exists, even in the most unexpected places, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need a little hope today, and leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever experienced a moment where a stranger showed up when you least expected it? I read every message, and your stories mean more than you know. And if you want more real stories like this, about love, resilience, and finding light in the dark, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're building a space here where broken doesn't mean defeated. Thanks for being part of it. We're not alone. Not really.